Have you ever witnessed compassion so pure it transcended every law of nature? When a baby elephant's desperate cries for help echoed through the Amazon as a massive anaconda crushed the life from her tiny body, it seemed no one could save her. But what happened when an old mountain gorilla heard those heartbreaking pleas? His response to a species he'd never encountered revealed a depth of empathy so profound it will shatter your heart into a million pieces. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Cuyabeno Wildlife Reserve stretches across the heart of Ecuador's Amazon basin like a living tapestry woven from countless shades of green and gold, where flooded forests create a labyrinth of channels, lagoons, and temporary islands that harbor some of South America's most extraordinary wildlife. Ancient cecropia trees rise from the dark water like cathedral spires, their massive trunks creating a complex network of aerial highways where howler monkeys swing alongside displaced creatures from distant continents who have found themselves sharing this impossible ecosystem. This remote corner of the Amazon serves as a sanctuary for animals that can never return to their original homes, victims of illegal trafficking, climate refugees, and conservation rescues who have formed their own unique community beyond the reach of traditional wildlife boundaries. The reserve's flooded geography creates unprecedented encounters between species that would never meet in nature, forcing adaptation and cooperation in ways that challenge every assumption about territorial behavior and survival instincts. What you're about to witness isn't just another conservation story about wildlife rescue and rehabilitation. This is about something far deeper that occurs when the universal language of suffering transcends every barrier that evolution has created between species. It's not about territorial boundaries or natural hierarchies. It's about the moment when empathy proves stronger than millions of years of evolutionary programming, creating bonds that defy every law of the natural world. The seasonal floods transform Cuyabeno into a vertical habitat, where creatures must navigate between water and canopy to survive. Here, in this aquatic wilderness, where the rules of land-based survival no longer apply, mountain gorillas rescued from African conflicts share territory with Asian elephants displaced by deforestation, creating an ecosystem that exists nowhere else on Earth. On this particular morning, as mist rose from the warm lagoons and the first rays of sunlight painted the water in shades of amber and gold, destiny was preparing to test the bonds of compassion in ways that would forever change how we understand the capacity for love that connects all conscious beings in this fragile world we share. In the heart of Cuyabeno's flooded canopy lived Kondo, an aging mountain gorilla, whose journey to the Amazon represented one of conservation's most remarkable success stories. The 35-year-old silverback had been rescued from civil war in the Democratic Republic of Congo 15 years earlier, his massive frame bearing the emotional scars of witnessing his family's destruction at the hands of armed militias. Now, in the twilight years of his life, Kondo had found unexpected peace among the cecropia trees, his gentle wisdom earning him respect from creatures that had never seen his kind before. Despite the trauma of his past, Kondo retained the nurturing instincts that marked him as a natural protector. His silver-streaked back caught the filtered jungle light as he moved carefully through his arboreal territory, each movement deliberate and considered. The old gorilla's dark eyes held depths of experience that spoke to decades of loss, adaptation, and the quiet strength that comes from surviving life's cruelest trials while maintaining one's capacity for compassion. Several kilometers away, in the reserve's most challenging terrain where seasonal floods created temporary islands and treacherous channels, lived little Nalani, a 6-month-old Asian elephant calf whose presence in South America represented the heartbreaking reality of wildlife trafficking. The orphaned calf had been rescued from smugglers attempting to transport her to private collectors, her tiny trunk still bearing the rope marks from her captivity. Nalani's golden-brown hide bore the distinctive markings of her Asian heritage, while her bright eyes sparkled with the resilient spirit that had helped her survive trauma that would have broken many adult animals. Despite her tragic beginning, the young elephant had adapted to her new environment with remarkable courage, learning to navigate the flooded terrain with the guidance of the reserve's dedicated caretakers. What made Nalani's story particularly poignant was her apparent understanding that she was alone in a world where no others of her kind existed. Her plaintive calls often echoed across the water at dawn and dusk, carrying the universal language of loneliness that seemed to touch the hearts of every creature within hearing distance, including a certain aging gorilla who understood the pain of being the last survivor. The first sign of trouble came as a subtle shift in Cuyabeno's aquatic symphony that Condo's sensitive ears detected from his resting place high in the canopy. The old gorilla had been peacefully foraging for tender shoots when the familiar chorus of morning sounds began to change in ways that triggered ancient survival instincts. The constant chatter of parrots and toucans grew sporadic, then ceased entirely in a wave of silence that spread across the flooded forest like ripples on still water. Condo's massive head lifted from his breakfast, his weathered features showing the kind of alertness that came from years of recognizing environmental warnings. His nostrils flared as he tested the humid air for scents that carried information about threats his adopted home had taught him to identify. The old silverback's experience in both African conflicts and Amazonian dangers had developed within him an almost supernatural ability to detect when the forest's delicate balance was about to be shattered. Several kilometers away, little Nalani was experiencing her own moment of unease as she played in the shallow waters near her favorite resting island. The young elephant calf had been splashing playfully among the water lilies when something in the lagoon's depths caught her attention. A disturbance in the water that spoke of massive movement beneath the surface, following patterns that suggested intelligence and predatory intent. The orphaned calf's trunk lifted from the water as she tested the air with the same instinctive caution that had helped her survive trafficking trauma. Her bright eyes scanned the dark channels between the islands, searching for the source of disturbance that had transformed her peaceful morning into something that felt increasingly dangerous. From the shadowy depths of the lagoon's deepest channel, something ancient and formidable was stirring with the patience of an apex predator that had ruled these waters for decades. The massive anaconda that slowly uncoiled from the submerged root system was easily 30 feet of pure muscular power, its olive-green scales perfectly camouflaged against the tannin-stained water as it began tracking the scent and vibrations of the small elephant calf whose innocent play had attracted its deadly attention. What erupted from the lagoon's murky depths was a nightmare of scales and muscle that dwarfed every predatory encounter in Cuyabeno's recorded history. The massive green anaconda that exploded from beneath the surface was a primordial monster 30 feet in length, its body thick as a barrel and glistening with the dark water of the flooded forest. This ancient serpent had ruled these waterways for over 2 decades, its enormous girth speaking to countless successful hunts that had eliminated every challenge to its aquatic dominance. The attack came with devastating swiftness that demonstrated millions of years of evolutionary perfection. Little Nalani, caught completely off guard while investigating a colorful water lily, had no time to react before the anaconda's massive coils wrapped around her small form with the inexorable force of a living vice. The young elephant's trumpet of terror pierced the morning air, a sound so heartbreaking it seemed to shatter the very soul of the forest. The serpent's strategy was diabolical in its calculated efficiency. Instead of attempting to drag Nalani into deeper water where she might drown quickly, the anaconda positioned itself in the lagoon's middle depth, shallow enough that the calf's struggles would be visible and audible, creating maximum psychological impact on any potential rescuers, while deep enough that the water would aid in the constriction process. Each of Nalani's desperate movements only seemed to trigger the anaconda's tightening response, the massive coils contracting with methodical precision that spoke to countless similar kills. The young elephant's trunk, her most versatile tool for communication and survival, was pinned helplessly against her body as the serpent's embrace systematically eliminated her ability to call for help or defend herself. The calf's cries for help echoed across the entire reserve with a desperation that transcended species boundaries. These weren't just the sounds of a dying animal. They were the universal language of terror and abandonment, carrying emotional frequencies that spoke directly to the protective instincts of every conscious being within miles. In the canopy above, Condo's ancient heart recognized something in those cries that would compel him toward an act of impossible courage. Condo's response to hearing Nalani's desperate cries revealed the profound internal battle raging within his massive frame. The aging silverback had survived civil war, witnessed the destruction of his own family, and endured years of grief that would have broken lesser spirits. Yet something in the young elephant's voice triggered memories that went deeper than personal trauma. These were the sounds he had heard from his own offspring before they were lost forever to human violence. The old gorilla's powerful hands clenched and unclenched as conflicting instincts warred within him. Every rational thought screamed that approaching an anaconda of that size was suicide. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Especially for a creature whose natural habitat was mountain forests, not Amazonian waterways. His aged body, though still powerful, carried the accumulated injuries of decades of survival, making any physical confrontation potentially fatal. But as Nalani's cries grew weaker, transforming from terror to the fading whimpers of approaching death, something deeper than self-preservation began to override Kondo's caution. The protective instincts that had made him a devoted father in his previous life now focused with laser intensity on this orphaned calf, whose situation mirrored his own tragic history of loss and abandonment. From various observation points around the lagoon, other reserve residents began responding to the crisis with their own species-specific reactions. Howler monkeys that had befriended Nalani during her months at the sanctuary gathered in nearby trees, their mournful calls creating a chorus of grief that seemed to acknowledge the loss they were witnessing. Colorful macaws that had learned to trust the gentle elephant circled overhead, their harsh cries adding to the cacophony of distress. The reserve's human caretakers remained oblivious to the drama unfolding in the remote lagoon, their morning routines continuing undisturbed, while one of their most beloved residents fought for her life mere kilometers away. The isolation that made Cuyabeno perfect for wildlife rehabilitation also meant that Nalani's only hope for survival lay with the creatures who shared her watery prison, particularly an aging gorilla whose heart was breaking as he listened to sounds that reminded him of everything he had lost. Kondo's decision to intervene came not from heroic impulse, but from something far more profound, the recognition that he could not survive witnessing another innocent death when he possessed the power to prevent it. The old gorilla began his descent from the canopy with movements that spoke to a resolve forged in the crucible of unimaginable loss. His powerful arms found purchase on branches and vines as he navigated the vertical maze of the flooded forest, driven by emotions that transcended every boundary between species and habitat. What made Kondo's approach extraordinary was the way he moved, not with the reckless abandon of panic, but with the calculated precision of a creature who had learned that survival required both courage and intelligence. His years of adapting to Amazonian life had taught him to navigate the aquatic environment, though every instinct screamed that water was not his natural element. As he drew closer to the lagoon, the aging silverback's vocalizations began to change in ways that wildlife researchers had never documented. His deep rumbling calls carried notes that seemed designed to communicate across species barriers, sounds that spoke the universal language of protection, comfort, and the promise that help was coming. These weren't the territorial displays typical of gorilla behavior, but something entirely new that emerged from the depths of empathetic connection. The anaconda, completely focused on the methodical process of crushing its prey, remained unaware of the approaching intervention. The serpent's ancient brain, evolved for aquatic ambush hunting, wasn't programmed to detect threats approaching through the canopy. This blind spot in the snake's otherwise perfect predatory awareness would prove crucial to Kondo's desperate strategy. From surrounding trees, other sanctuary residents began gathering to witness something unprecedented. The same creatures that had fled at the first sign of anaconda activity now seemed drawn back by an instinctive understanding that they were about to witness something historic, a moment when the boundaries between natural enemies would dissolve in the face of moral necessity. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test every assumption about territorial behavior, species loyalty, and the capacity for sacrifice that could emerge when love proved stronger than fear. Kondo's entry into the lagoon was a moment of pure heartbreak, disguised as heroic action. The aging gorilla's powerful frame, designed for mountain forests and solid ground, moved through the dark water with surprising determination, despite the obvious terror that every fiber of his being felt at entering this alien environment. His massive hands found purchase on submerged roots and branches as he propelled himself toward the scene of Nalani's torment, driven by emotions that had lain dormant since the loss of his own family. What made Kondo's approach truly heartbreaking was the way he vocalized throughout his desperate swim, not with the aggressive roars typically associated with gorilla confrontations, but with gentle rumbling sounds that seemed designed to comfort rather than intimidate. These were the sounds a father might make to reassure a frightened child, carrying across the water to reach Nalani's failing consciousness with messages of protection and love. The anaconda's reaction to this unprecedented intervention revealed the limitations of even apex predators when faced with scenarios outside their evolutionary experience. The massive serpent, startled by the gorilla's approach, momentarily loosened its grip on Nalani, as its primitive brain struggled to process this new threat that defied every category of danger it had learned to recognize. Kondo's strategy was heartbreakingly simple. He had no sophisticated plan, no tactical advantage, only the desperate determination of a soul who could not bear to witness another innocent death. His massive hands found the anaconda's coils with surprising gentleness, not striking or attacking, but attempting to pry them away from Nalani's small form with the same careful touch he had once used to comfort his own offspring. The old gorilla's eyes never left Nalani's face during this impossible struggle, his gaze communicating directly to her fading consciousness that she was no longer alone in her terror. His presence seemed to give the young elephant renewed strength, her weak trumpeting calls finding new volume as she recognized that someone, something, cared enough about her life to risk everything for her survival. The lagoon erupted in chaos as ancient predator met aging protector in a battle that would redefine everything both species thought they knew about the boundaries of compassion. The battle in the dark lagoon was unlike anything in the natural world, not a clash of predator against predator, but something far more profound as ancient grief met present suffering in a symphony of heartbreak and determination. Kondo's struggle with the anaconda revealed the full extent of his emotional investment in Nalani's survival, his every movement speaking to depths of love that transcended species boundaries and evolutionary logic. What made this confrontation truly heartbreaking was the way Kondo fought, not with the brutal efficiency of a territorial male, but with the desperate gentleness of someone who had already lost everything that mattered. His massive hands worked to loosen the anaconda's coils with surgical precision, each touch calibrated to free Nalani without causing her additional harm. The old gorilla's understanding of anatomy, developed through years of grooming family members, now served him in the most tragic application imaginable. The anaconda's response was equally unprecedented. The massive serpent, faced with an opponent who showed no aggression despite interfering with its kill, seemed confused by this violation of natural law. Predators were supposed to fight with fury, prey was supposed to flee in terror, but this gray-backed giant displayed neither response, only a heartbreaking determination to protect something that was not his own. The critical moment came when Kondo managed to create enough space for Nalani to draw her first full breath in several terrifying minutes. The young elephant's weak trumpet of relief seemed to give the old gorilla superhuman strength, his protective instincts flooding him with adrenaline that temporarily overcame the limitations of his aging body. But it was Kondo's voice that truly broke every heart within hearing distance. As he cradled little Nalani against his massive chest, the aging silverback began to make sounds that wildlife researchers had never documented. Gentle humming vocalizations that seemed to be gorilla lullabies, offered to comfort a dying child who was not his species, not his blood, but somehow had become his responsibility in this moment of ultimate crisis. The anaconda, recognizing that this hunt had become more than it bargained for, began its retreat into the deeper channels, leaving behind a scene that would forever redefine the meaning of love. The image of Kondo cradling little Nalani in the shallow water, became seared into the memory of every witness, human and animal alike. The aging gorilla's massive arm supported the young elephant's exhausted form with infinite gentleness, his weathered face pressed against her small head as he continued those heartbreaking lullabies that seemed to bridge every gap between species and suffering. Tears, actual tears, streamed down Kondo's cheeks as he held this orphan child who reminded him of everything he had lost and everything he still had to give. Nalani's recovery was slow but steady, her small trunk reaching up to touch Kondo's face in what could only be interpreted as gratitude mixed with the desperate need for connection. The young elephant's bright eyes, which had been glazing over with approaching death, now focused on her unlikely savior with an intensity that spoke to bonds forming in real time between souls who recognized each other's loneliness. What happened over the following hours broke the hearts of every sanctuary worker who arrived to find them still together in the shallows. Kondo refused to leave Nalani's side, his protective instincts now fully activated by an encounter that had awakened every dormant parental impulse within his grieving heart. The old gorilla seemed to understand that this orphaned calf needed exactly what he needed: family, protection, and the knowledge that someone in this world cared whether they lived or died. The sanctuary staff watched in amazement as an unprecedented interspecies adoption unfolded before their eyes. Kondo's gentle grooming of Nalani's injuries, his patient assistance as she regained her strength, and most heartbreakingly, his constant vocalizations of comfort revealed depths of emotional intelligence that challenged every assumption about animal consciousness and capacity for love. As the sun set over Cuyabeno's flooded forests, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, two orphaned souls had found each other in the vast loneliness of their shared exile. Their bond, forged in the crucible of life and death crisis, would become legendary among conservation workers as proof that love truly knows no boundaries, not of species, habitat, or evolutionary programming. The story of Kondo and Nalani became a beacon of hope in wildlife conservation circles, but its impact reached far beyond scientific communities to touch the hearts of millions who recognized in their bond something profound about the nature of love itself. Footage of the aging gorilla's rescue and subsequent adoption of the orphaned elephant became some of the most viewed wildlife content in internet history, not for its drama, but for its overwhelming display of pure, selfless compassion. Their daily interactions at Cuyabeno continued to break hearts and restore faith in equal measure. Kondo's patient teaching of Nalani how to navigate their flooded world, his protective positioning during thunderstorms, and most poignantly, his gentle lullabies during her nightmares revealed an emotional intelligence that redefined scientific understanding of animal consciousness. The young elephant, in turn, brought joy back into Kondo's eyes, a light that sanctuary workers had never seen during his years of solitary grief. Wildlife rehabilitation centers worldwide began restructuring their programs based on the Cuyabeno model, recognizing that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from human intervention, but from allowing displaced animals to find family in the most unexpected places. Their story inspired new approaches to conservation that emphasized emotional well-being alongside physical survival. Most profoundly, Kondo and Nalani's bond reminded humanity that the capacity for love transcends every boundary we think defines us. In a world often divided by differences, their story proved that empathy is the universal language that connects all conscious beings, regardless of species, origin, or circumstance. The Cuyabeno Wildlife Reserve continues to be home to their extraordinary family, their daily routines providing ongoing proof that the bonds forged in moments of crisis can heal even the deepest wounds. Researchers document behaviors that challenge fundamental assumptions about grief, adoption, and the healing power of unconditional love. In the heart of the Amazon, where two broken souls found each other, their legacy reminds us that family is not defined by blood or species, but by the willingness to risk everything for another's well-being, creating connections that prove love is indeed the most powerful force in nature. Hey, up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.